There's a little bit of awareness of Hogan's Alley as in, oh yeah, that's that spot between Main and Gore, that block there, where the viaduct is. I don't think they have a full understanding of the extent and the vibrancy of that larger community.
I can't tell you all the stories about how exciting it was, but you grew up fast. Yeah.
You ever heard of Louis Armstrong? We worked, we did a few things with him. And you know, you ever heard of Sammy Davis Jr.? We taught him how to dance.
Everywhere I go, every city I go to has a story of what urban renewal did to that city. It is invariably something that happened in a black neighborhood or a Chinatown. And in Vancouver, it was both.
It was a very close neighborhood at one time. And that was lost through this viaduct thing.
When I go down there now, I can see where my friend lived here. My friend lived here. Where I lived over there, all gone now. All gone.
The term Hogan's Alley kind of breeds urban myths, I think. I've heard all sorts of weird versions of who Hogan might have been, and it's all nonsense. I think what it really is a reference to a comic strip by Richard Outcault. It was really, it's funny because it was racist in a way, but against the Irish, right? And it was a kind of comically chaotic Irish ghetto in Hell's Kitchen in New York. And so it became synonymous with ghetto, or today we would say ghetto, right? But in those days you'd say it's a regular Hogan's Alley. It was kind of an idiom for a poor neighborhood. And as time passed, I think people forgot what the epithet referred to, and it just became the name of that alley. Hogan's Alley was a T-shaped alley. The north-south part ran parallel to Main Street, and then it teed right where the Georgia Viaduct is. So from Main all the way to Jackson Avenue, between Union Street on the north side and Pryor on the south. Hogan's Alley was not a black-only neighborhood at all. It was where Italians in Vancouver traced their origins to as well, and it was right on the edge of Chinatown. But it did have a cluster of black businesses and institutions in the church that were significant to the black community, and some residential areas.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about the neighborhood is the establishment of the train stations. There were two. There was the Great Northern Station and the Canadian National Station. So Great Northern is American, and Canadian National obviously is transcontinental. And the favored crews on those trains for the sleeping cars and dining cars were black men.
In the United States, it was traditional to hire black men as railway porters. Translated over into Canada, where there weren't as many black people, but it still became a tradition to hire black men as porters.
And it wasn't a menial job. That's one of the interesting things in black history, is that being a porter was something that you'd arrived. This was a very good position.
You had a uniform, you got to travel. It was a fairly well-paying job compared to some other jobs that were around.
And so at the end of the line, which Vancouver was, you then had that kind of layover, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days as you changed out the trains.
And I'm pretty sure that's why Hogan's Alley was where it was. If you go very far back, one of the earliest black institutions in that area was the porters' quarters. It was kind of a lounge for porters.
So you had this kind of mix of sort of transient folks coming in for a few days and stuff like that, and then you had the population that was already here. You also had the vaudeville circuits that came in, and the trains played an important role in that because you moved your vaudeville act by train, and all of the circuits came up to Vancouver. And so a lot of black performers came up into Vancouver. Some of them stayed, and others, like the Hendricks family, once the troupe went bust in Seattle, well, they ended up hearing about jobs in Vancouver, so that's why they ended up coming up to Vancouver. Even in the 1930s and 1940s, I mean, we were a major city, and our nightclubs brought everyone up here. And so we talk about it today as a well-known place and sort of the cliche Hollywood North. Well, we were Hollywood North before that was even an idea. So that whole entertainment history plays a huge role in the development of the city.
This is a holding copyright recorded on September the 26th, 1960. Words and music by the Crump twins, Robert P. and Ronald J., 856 East Cordova Street, Vancouver, BC.
Larry Babel, he's so bad, yeah, he's
He's bad. He is a bad, bad little boy. No, we were a duo. My dad taught how to tap dance. All my family were entertainers pretty well. We were born in Edmonton, Alberta, and came here when we were young. Same with Jimi Hendrix there. We knew him when he was we were all coming up. And then that's when we moved to Hogan's Alley. It was a cosmopolitan area. And there was a school there called Strathcona School. It was on the edge of Chinatown. Our church was there too. It was called the Fountain Chapel Church. Now Jackson and Pryor there. We went to Sunday school and to church there every Sunday. Our childhood was absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect, but it was a good area then. It would have been a good area now if it hadn't uprooted the community. You know, you are what your parents are. You know, they sang and they danced. We picked it up. And then one of my sisters there, she was a singer too. Her name was Honey Carlisle. That's what she called herself. And then we did all the hospitals, the community centers, and all that there. So we worked with them. We worked at the P&E for 4 or 5 years straight on a sideshow there. And it started of Harlem, the Royal Canadian Carnivals. We did Uptown, the Cave, the Palomar, the Hardy Club, and all the places like locally. And then we was down on Granville Street there where we met Louis Armstrong, and we had twins, and we drew his attention. And so he said, "What are you guys doing on Saturday afternoon?" We said nothing. So we ran home and told my mom, Louis Armstrong wants to come down to see a show on Saturday afternoon for the matinee. And his big thing is that the Crumb Twins are here because they were outstanding. And the joke is outstanding where? Outstanding on Granville Street.
For the women in the community, the centralized job option was the ownership of these chicken houses or speakeasies where you could go drink illegally during Prohibition in the 30s. The most famous would have been Vi's Chicken and Steaks, and attracted some very famous customers over the years.
Sammy Davis Jr. would come with his dad and his uncle. He was still young at that time, and they performed as a trio. The Mills Brothers, Duke Ellington, Nat King Cole, Louis Armstrong, and whoever was with his crew at the time. Lena Horne would come to the restaurant when she was in town. Mitzi Gaynor, Evan Kemp. They were entertainers from different backgrounds. Whoever came through the door, they were more than welcome and treated like they were special guests. They started the restaurant in 1948. My grandfather was the greeter, and my grandmother did all the work. She cooked and ran the whole show. So it closed at 4 a.m. So when entertainers would come to Vancouver, when their show was over, midnight, they would venture to the restaurant. And when my grandmother had time off, she would go to places like the Palomar and the Cave and Izzy's. And these were all your top-notch places in Vancouver. And I remember when we would enter the Cave, whoever was at the door would say, "Bye. Love to see it. Love to see it. Have a table for you." And we would end up winding through tables to the front, right at the front of the stage. It was kind of neat.
Hogan's Alley was a real political football through the 30s right up into the 60s. It was a working class immigrant enclave, that's what it was, but a poor neighborhood always. And so it had all sorts of social ills, and people had different perspectives on how to deal with that. And the vision of urban renewal is the one that kind of won out.
Vancouver has accepted the challenge, knowing that to build a better city requires only the industry and ingenuity of man.
Well, urban renewal usually refers to the idea of just clear-cutting existing neighborhoods. And so it's really a euphemism for slum clearance.
It's what they did in the States to build the projects. So they went from kind of organic freehold, a jumble of houses, to rationalizing them into these tower blocks. And the idea was this would be better for everybody, and it was far, far worse. And their justification for it was they emphasized the squalor of the neighborhood, and the term of the day was blight.
Blight is death to a city. Most of Vancouver is kept strong and healthy through the normal process of land and building renewal. But in areas such as this, nothing happens except dilapidation and decay gets worse each year. Property values fall, and blight is the result.
One of the city's building inspectors, Arthur Julius Burr, talked about blighted neighborhoods, but then he talked about it in the form of a disease in terms of if you didn't cure the blight in one spot, it would spread. And he has a phrase, I don't think he used the word tentacles, but it's kind of, it spreads like mold across the city, and suddenly you've got a huge problem on your hands. So it was kind of pitched in a sense that if we don't stop it now, we're in trouble for the future. From Main Street to Victoria Drive, from the harbor to the edge of the False Creek Basin where the railway tracks are. That's what they were going to take out to cure the city of its blight. And so at the same time as they're planning the urban renewal district, and you look at the drawings, you see these vast array of public housing projects and sweeping streets that ignore a grid, and then you see the 12-lane freeway going right through the project.
You know, it sounds like a conspiracy theory or something, but it wasn't. What it was the arrival of car culture.
We have become the nation on wheels, with more motorized mobility than ever dreamed of before.
That idea that people would work in the city and live in the suburbs. Well, if they're going to do that, they need to get there through a freeway system. If they're going to get there fast, we're going to put a freeway in. Where do we put the freeway in? Well, we're not going to put it through a community that has power and will oppose us. We'll put it through a community that's regarded as weak and that we can bully. And that's basically why every major city in North America has a black community that had a freeway run through it or run over top of it, and then has these project tower blocks there. And all that is exactly what happened in Vancouver.
So they parceled it out in a couple of phases, and they had phase one when that was cleared, which eliminated the core of what we think of as Hogan's Alley. Then there was a phase two and a phase three. And luckily for, I think, the city of Vancouver, is that as they cleared the first piece, there were a lot of residents that were kind of like, what the hell is going on?
By the time they actually struck ground and started building and expropriated the buildings that were there, it was the 60s, and people were far more empowered. And so people in the neighborhood rose up against the plan.
And what you had was on the freeway, a citywide protest, not just localized, but citywide protest on the freeway. You had other cities built freeway systems, and we were able to look at, like, oh my God, look at what that did. The I-5 in Seattle was a perfect example of ripping the city in half. And so it's a perfect storm of public protest, watching what's happening elsewhere in North America, bringing that experience back to Vancouver and going, nah, this shouldn't happen here. And so it's really that awakening of what really becomes the city that we have today starts at that point.
Well, a lot of people look at Vancouver as a model of urban planning, partly because there is no interurban freeway. So the irony is, that was not planning, that was activism that stopped that. We stopped it, but not before the black community itself had actually been targeted.
Looking back on it from my perspective, I feel badly for the people who were a part of that community. When it was vibrant, when people could say, how are you? And they would know the names of the other person's kids.
One of the interesting things that as we move forward is that the current Georgia and Dunsmuir viaducts are now slated for demolition. This is a real golden opportunity.
I think this history is the soul of Vancouver, really. This is, how Vancouver decided to become a city that does things differently.
There should be a monument there of some kind saying what was there. and what a good community that it was.
It has to be meaningful, and it has to be respectful, but it has to really, Joe Bloggs 40 years from now has to walk up to that thing and go, whoa, who knew? And wow.
My sunshine, oh my only sunshine.
Yeah.
You make me happy.
Oh yeah.
When skies are gray.
When skies are gray.
You never know,
You
dear,
never know
how much I love you.
I love you.
Please don't take my sunshine away. I'll always love you.
Oh wow.
Da-da-da-da-da.
Well, do they?
Scooby-Dooby. Scooby-Dooby-Day. Scooby-Dooby wah-wah. Ba-da-bo-ba-bo. Please don't take my sunshine away.